with Mayor Zach Vruwink here in Wisconsin Rapids for Mayor's Monday this week. So we're about a month out from those really big storms we had here in the area. A lot of an impact here down in Rapids. So how's things been so far in that month since?
Sure. Well, it's hard to believe it's already been a month. The time has flown. We spent a lot of time working on storm recovery and cleanup efforts. So we've been doing primarily debris removal across the city. And during that time, we've also met with Wood County Emergency Management, came together with city staff, department heads, as well as agencies from the county and external agencies like hospital and other area agencies that would that had a role to play. Since the storm event was, while it was generally a wind event that caused damage both to properties and to impeded our thoroughfares and such, there were a lot of impacts because of the lingering power outages. And so came together as a group to talk about what went well and what we'd like to improve for the future. Some of the things that went really well was communication. For speaking for the city and for me, felt it was really important to communicate early and often, that residents need to know what was happening and updates. And so we were really, I felt, did a good job in getting regular communication out. Of course, we couldn't predict how long power restoration efforts were going to take, but we knew it would take days. And so we kept reminding people, if your food had gotten to a certain day threshold where it hadn't been refrigerated or frozen any longer, it's no longer safe to eat, take precautions. We also stood up a lot of mobilized charging stations. So residents who had medical devices or equipment that maybe exhausted their battery backups or needed to recharge those things, we made sure that we had sites open. So initially we opened up the City Centralia Center, and that was staffed and supported not only by our auxiliary police force, so we thank them, but also the Chamber of Commerce stepped up to help us out, as well as some volunteers from emergency management. And we kept that open all week long, and I think that was also an area that worked really well for us this time around, at least in this storm event. Other areas to improve for the future, some things we can't fix sometimes are the fact that we don't know when these disasters are going to happen. So people's lives are, the summertime are maybe busier than they are, or at least they're out of the office taking vacations or out of town. So that was a bit of a challenge. It was just getting in touch and making sure we knew getting in touch with who was in town and working or would be available to respond that day. So that was another thing that was identified as a challenge, not something you can always do enough about. But one was training, that we knew, we identified that as people had turned over in their positions and there were new people in their roles, that they may not have received emergency preparedness training before. So one thing we're going to be doing is looking at everyone and their previous attainment when it comes to what they call NIMS training and certain levels of certification. So that's an area for improvement. And then just last week, we got word that FEMA was going to be visiting our area, and so we met with them on Thursday, shared with them essentially all of the significant areas of damage to city property and city buildings. Since FEMA's scope with us was public property, not private individual properties, we had to walk them through pretty much everything in the city that had tree damage, property damage, site damage. And from there, we presented a bunch of cost estimates and numbers that FEMA will package and then review and then send it up to the agency in Washington, D.C. And from there, we hope that President Trump will give us a disaster declaration in which we'll be eligible to receive some of the cost recovery associated with that. For us here in Wisconsin Rapids, between our public power utility and the city's Department of Public Works and other city departments, we've incurred just under $3 million in what we believe are costs attributed to the storm. And that's either past costs, whether it's power restoration or overtime and clearing streets, equipment associated with that, or just the ongoing brush pickup activities that are happening at the curb sites, grinding at the compost sites. It's amazing how much work has gone into just the recovery and restoration efforts. And there's a lot more to do around the city. The city looks a lot better than it did a month ago. But I'll tell you, people rallied, neighbors came together, they supported each other. A lot of folks found people that had generators, so if they had essential equipment, they plugged into their equipment to generators. So it's really neat to see the neighborly friendliness that we know exists in Wisconsin Rapids get shown in the forefront after the storm.
So, do you know at all what that timeline could be with FEMA and getting any help federally?
It's a great question. I asked that same question this morning, and they had stated that between a month and 6 months to hear back from FEMA and whether, because it essentially goes to the president's desk and he's got to review it and his administration and make a determination.
And then with the city's timeline for cleanup, do you have any estimates of when things could be kind of back to normal, or is it still kind of up in the air right now?
Good question. The difficulty for us was summer is our busiest time of the year, right? That's when we do all of our construction. That's all when we do we have to maintain all of our properties, our public parks, city buildings and that sort of thing. So that really disrupted our plans for the year. Effectively, we took a month out of our schedule where we shifted gears and put all hands on deck to cleanup and debris removal efforts. So we're continuing to analyze what's our flexibility in those maintenance priorities and such, so we can say, well, we'll do this amount next year and be okay. The trouble is, when we do street surface treatments over the summer, that's one such area that involves a lot of contract labor and costs. So that's one that if we incurred these costs through storm debris removal, we probably can't afford that. Now, if we get reimbursement from the federal government, that changes the discussion a little bit. But nonetheless, it's been very disruptive, and we really haven't seen the full scale of what the effect will be. But we're back to most of our regular priorities, our street construction priorities. And we hope that we can stay, or Mother Nature will be very forgiving to us this year, and we can have a long summer and fall to be able to wrap up these projects by November.
And speaking about street construction projects, how are those going right now in the city? What are kind of the big areas that people should be looking out for, and when can they kind of expect things to sort of maybe wrap up here in the next month or two?
Well, we have a number of major projects happening throughout the city. The first is East Grand Avenue reconstruction, really from the bridge all the way to 8th Street. That has been done in phases. It's ahead of schedule and actually under budget right now, so we're pleased to see that. Just last week, the intersection of 3rd Street and East Grand reopened to cross traffic, and the contractors continue to work on opening up or completing the rest of the project. The next intersection that'll open, which will actually open next week, is Lincoln Street. And Lincoln Street is a main thoroughfare for folks connecting to Jackson Street and across downtown area, kind of a bypass area. So we'll be very pleased to have that reopened to the public for cross traffic. But there are a number of areas where the East Grand Avenue project needs to get wrapped up. They're still doing landscaping, still doing some of the concrete sidewalk pouring. I think the curb and gutter and most of the street surface is now done in that area. But again, they're ahead of schedule and under budget at this point, so that's good news. The other project that we just kicked off last week, which is Chase Street from 17th Avenue to 21st Avenue. And that project is entirely done by city forces. So we shifted our gears a bit, as I mentioned, around storm recovery and debris removal, and now we moved our crews back to working in the construction area on 17th and Chase Street. And that is expected to open yet this fall. Another project we've got on the docket is the city's senior center, community theater, and other entities are housed in our Centralia Center, and that's a city building, and we'll be replacing that parking lot this fall. So not a schedule on that, given that we don't really know how quickly we can progress, especially with rain events and rain days, but we hope again that Mother Nature is very cooperative to helping us with that. And another project that's not necessarily led by the city, we're supporting various aspects of it, is 2nd Avenue, which runs into the roundabout by the state office building. It's a very heavily trafficked corridor. It's on a state highway, and contract crews are continuing to work through that and making great progress. That's in support of subcontractors as well as state financial resources to help accomplish that. And that project should be wrapped up here in the coming weeks. And so there's still a while. We're going to see those orange construction barrels throughout town. But as I've reminded people from the very beginning, it's worth it. It's just sometimes inconvenient, sometimes disruptive, and for those that own businesses, it can be very disruptive. So we appreciate their patience and certainly encourage them to continue to market to customers and get people to their front doors, despite sometimes the impediments that these construction projects can make for them.
And are there any big community events coming up in the end of August, beginning of September?
Yeah, we've got the Grand Affair coming up, which is the first Sunday in September. And that is our downtown festival, fall festival, basically kicking off fall right after the Labor Day weekend. And that event offers a car show, a vendor fair, and different performances down on the city's riverfront downtown. So it's a great festival. Encourage people to come out and check that. It's a one-day festival on the first Sunday in September.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to
I think we
mention?
covered it.